Guys, welcome back to the channel. So this is my conversation with Jack of Nobody Special Finance. I'm going to link to his channel below. Let me know what you guys think of the long format content. I think every minute of this hour talk was packed with something awesome and a lot of interesting ideas were covered. So hopefully we'll have more of this stuff coming for you. Sweet. All right, guys. So I'm on with Nobody Special. Been practicing that all day. This is Jack with his YouTube channel, Nobody Special. I brought Jack on. I actually first found you on Reddit. And a couple guys were like, oh, Trav, I'm never on Reddit, man. That's like for kids. And I'm like, no, you don't understand. Like Reddit's where it's at. It really is genuinely where it's at because you can find all sorts of different groups that you're interested in. For example, the Wall Street Silver group, I'm in that group. Monero, I'm interested in Monero, I'm in that group. Monero mining, I'm in that group. Linux, trying to learn Linux, I'm in that group. So when you're on there, it's just a really, and it's an anonymous platform, kind of is. I mean, I have a screen name that's OnSiteTrav, but nonetheless, it's a cool platform as opposed to other social media platforms. But that's where I found you, and I think it was maybe in the Wall Street Silver group.
Yeah, that's actually where my channel was born. You know, I've only been doing this since about June on YouTube. I started, it was right around the silver squeeze, right after the silver squeeze started. And I was watching some of the friction back and forth between Wall Street Bets and Wall Street Silver, you know, after some of the infighting started. And, you know, I just kind of had enough. And, you know, I got a big mouth. So I just grabbed my cell phone, went down in the basement. I didn't even tell anybody I was going to do this. You know, my wife and my kids were here. And I just started ranting in the phone, and I just started with, "What's up, guys? I'm nobody special. Like, there's no reason for you to listen to me. I have no authority on the subject. I have no background in finance, anything like that. I'm just a guy with a big mouth and something to say." And I started ranting about inflation and how gold and silver prices had been manipulated for so long, and how, you know, so many of society's problems can really be traced down to this broken money that we use. And it's used to pit us against each other, and it causes this infighting, and it makes slaves of a lot of people, and they don't even realize it. So I just started ranting, and I actually tried to post that video 7 or 8 times. It failed every time because trying to upload a video through the Reddit mobile app is really a chore. I don't know if you knew that, but it's a miserable experience.
No, I haven't tried it myself.
So I gave up, and I just turned it off. And then the next morning I woke up and I had like 400 notifications on my phone. Apparently one of those uploads actually did go through. And up until that point, I had never had even like 10 upvotes on something on Reddit. I had no social media presence whatsoever.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, wow, look at that. That was pretty well received. So I made another one and another one. And the next thing I know, I was doing it almost every day. And a lot of people kept saying, you should start a YouTube channel. You should start a YouTube channel. And eventually I took their advice. So here I am. And I stuck with the moniker Nobody Special because, again, I don't want to pass myself off as some kind of financial expert. I'm not. I don't have any background in finance. You know, but I've always said I don't really think you need one. I think that's one of the big cons of our time.
You definitely
is that
don't.
These frat bro guys in finance, we think they're so smart, or they try to pass themselves off as so smart. They really aren't. It's really not that complex.
I have a degree in finance. So yeah, it's definitely it's bro science for sure. It's about sales. That's what finance is about. I decided to not go the mutual fund route or the financial advisor route. And I remember telling one of my buddies recently, like a recent from graduating, so this is a decade ago. And I was like, yeah, I'm just going to wait for the fiat financial system to fail and take all your clients. And he's like, wait, what are you talking about? And I'm like, dude, we just went through 4 years of education. Like, can you not see we are on a gold standard? We're not on a gold standard. It's going to all end not so good. Like, you can't, you know what I mean? Oh, Trav, that'll never happen. That'll never happen. And you bring in an interesting point there, because really money is just a ratio of unit of account. Proverbs refers to it as the Lord detests unequal weights and balances. And so when you take an ounce of silver, an ounce of gold, or copper, or whatever, it could be a Bitcoin, it could be anything, as long as it has a relative ratio to something else. It could be a dollar, but the catch is it has to have a constraint. It can't be just printed forever. It doesn't have to be anything. It's as simple. I mean, Bitcoin is literally an online spreadsheet. That's it. It's literally a spreadsheet. It's a ledger. And it's just like, hey, here's the money supply, and here's the value based on the demand. And so yeah, what do you want to buy with it? And then people can ratio out like, oh well, relative to other goods and services, what is this worth? And then you can compute time value of money. And so then you can cross time. And Bitcoin actually does a really good job of this, or crypto in general, because you can theoretically calculate for the unit of time, which in all other aspects of finance, there's not really good formulas to figure it out. But nonetheless, you bring up a great point, because the base layer of our society is completely broken.
And with Bitcoin, Satoshi, whoever he was or they were, we may never know. It was really a financial rebellion. I mean, they've been playing this game with our money, you could say, since 1971. You could go back further to 33. You could go back to, what was it, 1913 and the founding of the Federal Reserve.
Yeah.
But they've been slowly stealing from us through the devaluation of our currency. And so we made our own money, and they're not allowed to play anymore. And of course, they're coming after it. They're going to try to regulate it away. And, there's going to be these big volatility price swings in Bitcoin because it's so new. But I believe very strongly in Bitcoin and cryptocurrency. I invest regularly in Bitcoin. I try not to spend too much time worrying about the day-to-day price fluctuations in it.
Yep.
I try to have a very zoom out approach. We could wake up tomorrow and find out Tether was a Ponzi scheme and Bitcoin could sell off 80%. And I think in 10, 15 years, it won't matter. I think it'll just be a blip on the chart 10, 15 years from now. So I set it and I forget it.
That's very true.
And I don't try to trade it. The last time I got into Bitcoin was 2017. And I saw the Carlos from New York Big Connect video. I don't know if you remember that video.
I remember it.
Connect, that guy.
I remember it.
And I was like, oh, that's it. It's a scam, and I sold all my Bitcoin and all my Ethereum. I had a little bit of Litecoin at the time. I sold all of it. And sure enough, it was a scam. It was a Ponzi scheme, and it crashed, and Bitcoin went all the way down $3,000. So I was right. It was a crash. Problem is, by the time I bought back into Bitcoin, it was higher than where I had sold it from. So if I had just done nothing, I'd be better off today. So,
with crypto, it's an interesting thing, because people that are Bitcoin maximalists, and it's different. And I'll be the first to say Bitcoin maximalism it's got a long road to go. If it's going, it's got a lot of negotiation to bridge. There are men with guns that are not happy about that, and it's fully public blockchain, so it's going to be a challenge. It's like going out there completely naked without shielded, and that's why I'm more of a proponent for this period of history on the private cryptos, because that's our next couple battles down the road, which is like, hey, we're taxing all these transactions. As things start to devolve, in my opinion, I have more of a negative view for the moment that we're in a decline. It doesn't mean that we stay in a decline. In Rome, they had a character named Caesar. It's so famous that they still have plays every year in high school over this guy. But Rome was in a decline. But there was this moment where this guy Caesar comes in, and they have this little boost up. Now, they were still in a 400-year decline, but they were able to milk those extra decades and centuries out of the empire from the policies that this guy did. He was basically a peacemaker. And that's actually how he went out, is he forgave two of his enemies and they stabbed him in the back, literally at court. So it's like, hey man, you were too nice. But nonetheless, how do you see this next period of history going? And I'm referring to this period, what they would refer to as a fourth turning, which they would say when our generation Z is coming of age, meaning they're turning 18, and the last of them is now 18. We would expect this turning to have occurred, and our baby boomers at that point to be dying off. So we'll have this turning of our population. What's your crystal ball from here through the 20s, maybe into the early 30s? How do you see this playing out?
I see it playing out exactly like the last century, just on fast forward. Things move faster now. Information, people, trade, everything moves at a bigger pace right now. But we think we're so different. We think we're so much better, so much smarter now. We're making the same stupid mistakes.
Yeah.
And And I don't want to get too depressing and too gloom and doomy, but the 1900s, the 20th century was the bloodiest period the world has ever seen. I
Mhm.
mean, we talked about Rome, the Roman Civil War, and medieval times and their worst day never stacked up bodies the way fascism and communism did in the last century. Not even close.
Yep.
And our ability, our capacity for violence has only improved. Our technology has only improved. And I see us repeating a lot of the mistakes that started a lot of that violence the last time around. I mean, look, we had how do I say this without getting your channel in trouble? A medical condition in the early 1900s, right? 1918,
1917.
1919,
Yep.
right? And then that brought about a period of inflation and a very short depression, followed by a commodity super cycle. And what do we have going on right now? We had the same thing, right? So it's the mid 1920s right now. We had the medical situation, and now we have this commodity boom going on with the inflation. And
so let me ask you this. Do you think that we could continue through most of the 20s, or at least halfway through, maybe 25, where things are still full pump mode and we're in this crack up boom, and it doesn't get to the crash of 29? Because I think what everyone's waiting for is that moment, because everything's clearly crazy right now, right? I mean, Bitcoin doesn't 10x in 1 year if everything's okay. Dogecoin doesn't like 4,000x in 1 year if everything's okay. Like, it's clear that things are not totally normal. But to your point, things move faster now. So there are network effects. People are connected. People can, vote with their dollars. But do you think that 1929 moment inevitably comes?
Yes, I think my personal opinion, a lot sooner. It's funny you should mention 2025. If you were to plot out, I don't want to get too technical here, but if you were to plot out the interest rate on the 10-year US Treasury over the last 30 or 40 years, and then you mark all of the big financial events, the pandemic, the great financial crisis, the dot-com bubble collapsing, the bond market collapse in the 1990s, Black Tuesday in 1987, right? And you were to connect the dot to all of those lines, it creates this downward sloping line of the maximum tolerance for interest rates that our economy has. And it makes sense that this would be a downward sloping line because the mountain of debt in all aspects of life has only grown since we went off the gold standard. Not just federal debt, obviously that's the big one, but mortgage debt, credit card debt, right? Pension fund debt, municipal debt, every aspect of our society.
Well put. Yeah.
Well, that line goes to zero in 2025.
Oh yeah.
By 2025, the maximum tolerable interest rate in our economy will be zero.
Yep.
And every time we have crossed that line, there has been some major financial event. The last one was December of 2018, and that was the famous Powell pivot, when he went from hiking interest rates to very abruptly cutting interest rates. And this was, I remember watching this saying, something's broken here, because we have peak employment.
Yeah.
The stock market was seemingly making all-time highs every day. And then all of a sudden, started in November of 2018, the market just started crashing, and it ended up dropping about 20% before Powell pivoted and turned into a dove. And then a few months later, he started printing money again. Now we're printing money and we're lowering interest rates during a period of economic prosperity. Something's not right here. And then, we all know what happened in 2020. Well, these rates are heading back up now. And the Federal Reserve is talking about hiking rates 2, maybe 3 times next year. That gets us awful close to that descending line of interest rate tolerance. And right now, we get anywhere near 2.5% on that 10-year Treasury, something's going to break in the economy. I can't tell you what will be the triggering event, but something always breaks when we get near that line.
All right. So for the audience, the guys that are trying to follow with where this is going. So essentially, there's a debt market and there's an equity market. Equity is you buy stock into my company. Debt is you buy my bond, and it is what it is. Like, equity is you're an owner. Debt is you're either a borrower or a lender. The equity market that we have in North America, and I would say most of the world, but definitely North America, is a derivative of the debt market. And so when we see the stock market pumping, it's because all is well in the debt market. The problem is, as you have so much debt, because we're a debt-based currency, if those interest rates rise, it's a denominator. So you cut the value of the money supply, if you will, the expansionary value of it by the denominator. So if you have 0, you're denominating by 0, everything's cool. If you have 100 divided by 0, totally cool. If you have 100 divided by 1, it's still fine. But if you have 100 divided by 2, you're at 50. And that's what Jack is putting at, is that if you were to go back to the 1980s, the early 1980s, where Paul Volcker has to jack interest rates up after the Carter administration, which is basically an old school Biden administration. A lot of things were happening in the same way. He got in there and he got interest rates all the way up to 18%. So if you take, the interest rates and just using my example of 100 and dividing it by the denominator, divided by 18, you're looking at 20, or roughly around there. So a 1929 crash is a 80% equity crash, and that's where you get the numbers by 25. And so the question for you, Jack, is: do you see this being a hyperinflationary event to remove the debt, or do you see this being a 1930s depressionary, deflationary event?
If I could tell you which direction they're going to go when they get to that crossroad,
yeah,
I would put everything I had on that, and I'd make that bet, and I'd be a billionaire when it happens.
Okay, so you're like, I don't know which way it's going to go.
They are going to get to that crossroads where they're going to have to pick one.
Yeah. Right? Now, the reason I say this for the audience, because I've got guys in the audience, they're hot shots, they're young kids. They're like, yo, Trav, here's what you do. You pull the equity out of your house, you finance your truck, you got as much debt as possible. You're sitting in the cash, but you can't keep your cash. So you flip it into metals, you flip it into cryptos, right? You flip it into
hyperinflation, that works.
Hyperinflation, it works out, bro, because you go mow like one lawn, you get paid $50,000, you pay off your truck, great. But if
they go 1929,
if it goes 1929,
now that debt you took out is worth more. Now you're a slave for the rest of your life. Now, so the one thing that I would lean towards hyperinflation versus deflationary crash.
Okay.
All right, and we may get kind of a little bit of a deflationary crash and then the hyperinflation, kind of like Ninja's Whippet theory.
Yep.
The reason I'm leaning towards hyperinflation is because of that federal debt.
Okay.
And because of the decision makers, right? Whenever we hear about they won't let this happen, like whoever they are, the people in charge, right?
On this channel, we refer to them as the elite.
The elitists.
So if we get to a French Revolution in a moment, we know who to tag.
The elitists have assets.
The name is the elites.
Yep.
The elites are responsible for this, no doubt.
They've got assets and they've got debt. Okay. So the assets and the debts win in hyperinflation. And for that reason, I'm leaning towards hyperinflation because it benefits the decision makers most.
Yep.
But I think the crash is still coming. I think we're going to get a little bit of that crash because right now they have to pretend to care about inflation.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's good optics, right? People, when it gets too expensive to eat, the masses get angry. And we saw in the Arab Spring in 2011 and 12, when the masses get angry, the elites tend to end up hanging from a rope or having their heads cut off.
In the French Revolution, they did.
Yes.
It's interesting, a little sidestep, because you're from Pennsylvania. I was earlier this month, in Dewshore County, Pennsylvania, little area, beautiful area. It ends up being named after a general, Dewshore. And he was the general that the French elite had assigned to go to this area in Pennsylvania and build a new estate. And so they had built an estate fit for the French royalty, and they never got out before the revolution happened.
It was their bug out location.
It was their bug out. And so we were hunting out on my buddy's family farm, and they've been out there since the 1800s. And he's like, "Hey, Trav, this is made for royalty out here, like, and it's a cool spot." But it's interesting because when it gets to that spot, that's typically what happens.
So here's how I see this playing out, right? And I use the metaphor of a drug dealer a lot, right? The drug dealer is the Federal Reserve. The addict is us, the economy, and the drug is easy money, cheap money, whether it's stimmies or low interest rates, right? Easy money is the drug, and we are addicted, hopelessly
Everybody
addicted.
loves easy money.
Yeah.
Like, it's great to go to a Bobcat dealer and get a Bobcat for 0% down. We love it. It's great.
And like any addict, we have needed bigger and bigger doses of the drug, the easy money, to achieve the same effect over time. As we've been addicted for so long, we need more and more of it now to get the same effect. Well, now we're at the point where the doses are getting so big, we're starting to damage our body. Because now if we get another fix, it has to be so big, we're going to kill ourselves. And that damage to the body, that's inflation.
Mhm.
That's inflation wreaking havoc in the economy. So we go to the drug dealer and say, I got to get clean. Don't sell me this stuff anymore, please. I got to get clean. And the drug dealer, he's laughing to himself. He says, all right, you know what?
Right.
The next time you come to me and you want to buy from me, I won't sell you any. I'm here for you. I'm going to help you. That's going to be what the Federal Reserve is going to do. That's the taper, right? With them slowing down their money printing and their asset purchases and then raising their interest rates. That's them helping us get clean. They know what's going to happen. We're going to come back in 6 months when we're just clawing at ourselves. You got to turn the printer back on. I need just a little bit. Say, okay, now I'll turn it back on. Since you insisted, I want to help you out. And that freak out, right? That withdrawal, that's going to be that market crash. But I don't think they'll let it get to 29 proportions. They could, but that hurts them. Because remember, they have a $30 trillion federal debt. How do you ever pay that back or even sustain it if you let deflation set in?
Right.
And I think that's been the plan all along with the debt, is to inflate it away, not to ever pay it back, to just inflate it away so it's worthless. So they can't allow that deflationary crash. They'll let us get a taste of it to the point where John and Jane Q. Public will be begging the Fed to start the printer back up. That's when we get the hyperinflation. And that's why I am, the more I see things playing out right now, I think Ninja is right on the money with his dollar Whippet theory, that we get inflation and then deflation and then hyperinflation. Because I see the political dynamics and everything action the Fed is taking, I see it all fitting right into that scenario playing out.
Yep. But until we get to that crossroads, we don't truly know. So for the audience, it's like, so the dollar Whippet theory is this: we're in an inflationary moment, and there's a couple reasons why we're inflationary. One, supply crunches are inflationary. That's just how it is. If you can't get your product, things inflate. If you can't get it shipped in, things inflate. If gas goes up, it inflates. Everything inflates. But that inflation gets us to a point where we're pinched, because eventually credit card is maxed, the bank account is drained, and we don't have our products or goods or services. And so what happens is business activity slows down. This is my buddy in the window company. He's like, dude, I'm going to do less business because my window prices keep changing on me. He's got plenty of money. I've seen his offshore boat. He just picked one. Like, he's good. He's fine. He's got a car for every day of the week. He doesn't need to work, but he does have 17 employees. And so I'm talking to him like, hey, why don't you just go down to 4 employees, man? And he's like, actually, that'd be cool. Then I could go fishing. And I'm like, yeah, you probably should. His boat has 50 hours on it. Brand new. It's got like 350, twin 350s on it. Brand new. Only has 50 hours on it. It's had it for a year.
It's always better to have a friend with a boat, right, Trev?
This is my neighbor, my Kulak neighbor, right? I've got a boat too, but his is a totally different boat. But it's so what happens is you get to this inflationary point that forces this deflationary point, because it just becomes difficult to do business. And at the beginning of an inflation, things look like they're pumping. Everything looks like it's good. Your revenue top line is good. So therefore everything looks like it's good, but the bottom line eventually goes to 0 or a balanced out of a 1-to-1. You're spending what you're making. And so people start to pull back or constrain, or they don't go to vacation, or they don't buy the extra hotel room, or whatever it might be. They don't buy the extras. And so what happens is it causes a contraction. The same thing that's happening with this fourth turning is our demographics are such, our pyramid of population is such where our baby boomers are literally 61 years old, the youngest of them, which means they've reached peak spending. My dad has bought all of the new homes he's going to buy. He's bought all of the new cars he's going to buy. The only thing that happens with dad and mom from here is he turns 75 and he buys maybe his last car. It's probably a minivan, right? Like, it's one of those things. And then he turns 80. And then towards the end of his lifespan there, it's just medical expenses and nursing home, right? So there's no consumption goods. 2 years ago, he's on a cruise like every week. Him and mom are like on a cruise. Like, I mean, they're traveling around the world all the time. Oh, the kids are gone. Everything's great. We got the house paid off. You know what I mean? We're just traveling, right? But what's going to happen is dad's going to start pulling out of his retirement account about 65. right? Along with all of his millions of baby boomers, and there's not enough Gen Xers and millennials and Gen Zs underneath to compensate for how much is coming out of the equity markets versus what's going in the economic markets, not to mention how much production has to happen in the economy as far as people that actually work versus people that are just, quote, retired or wanted to be retired. Because I think retirement is a myth. But
Yeah.
so we're at this spot where the demographics are crappy and the financial balance sheet is crappy. And the political situation is about as worse as it's been in a hot minute since like the last time we did this in like the 20s.
Yeah, it's fine. I just wrote that down. Retirement is a myth. I really like that. I've always said retirement may go down in history as a failed social experiment.
Mm-hmm.
It's really only 1 or 2 generations old. In
Mm-hmm.
all the history of human civilization, we worked until we died.
Yeah.
And we only have this concept of retirement very recently. And, you know, look at all those charts that go like this, the stock market straight up and the debt pile straight up. It's retirement and entitlements and that kind of, that's all at the root of it. And,
Yeah.
you know, we're going to be the first generations to live vicariously through our parents.
Oh, for
I
sure.
think that's,
For
you
sure.
know, that's what it comes down to. Because
look, I was hunting with these guys and they genuinely think, they genuinely believe that their children are going to have a lower standard of living than them.
yeah,
That's
and
new. That's
I think
new.
it's inevitable.
Oh, for sure.
And, you know, look around. We've got, you know, I drove my girls to a little zoo camp today. They had the day off of school.
Yep.
It was like a 40-minute drive. And I lost count of the help wanted signs I saw everywhere. I mean, there was a new temp agency and it looked like a brand new building, neon sign out front. And I was stopped at a red light and every 5 seconds it was another job posting. But the job postings were for barista, for wait staff, for receptionist, right? Low paying, service oriented jobs. And, you know, the people retiring are skilled laborers or, you know, career white collar, and they're selling down their assets, like you mentioned. And the people that are coming up to replace them in the workforce are not investing the same way they did. So your net effect is going to be a withdrawal from the asset market in the form of real estate and stocks. So yeah, that right there is going to be downward pressure on everything. That's going to be deflationary.
For sure. For sure. And so I have a perhaps a different, maybe more positive scenario on how this might go. So we're 20 into this one. I'm gonna let this one probably roll long if you're down for it. Because I see this as a potential opportunity. And so I agree with your perspective and the ninja's dollar whippet theory at this point in time, where inflation turns into a deflationary period. And what we mean by a deflationary period, guys, is that we're probably very likely still in a bull market, and that March 2020 was the last the bottoming of that bull market. In a way, it was a pullback, but it still kept pumping, right? Yeah, the stocks and things like that came down 50% for 90 days, but don't worry about it, right? Because it was an excuse to turn on the money printers, which the Federal Reserve needed in September of 19. They needed this, all right? And the World Economic Forum was like, hey, you know, we did a pandemic demo test drive with our elites just to test the idea of a pandemic. Like, it's really interesting because all of their videos, and this is what I mean when I say the decline of empire, all of these elites are dumb enough to have posted all of this stuff online. And now the narrative is out of the bag. And so you have common people that are like, hey, is there a great reset occurring? And so this is why, you know, things happen faster, but also we may come out of this period of history, because I think what we're approaching a revolution-like moment, meaning everything is going to change. So like Martin Luther, first revolution that we really see, and I'm talking like Protestant Martin Luther, he has a printing press. He's got the ability to literally write something and turn it into a book, into a pamphlet, not a great book, really a flyer. Okay. The guy has like Microsoft Word and can make like a 200-word document. All right. And so he's like, hey, I have an idea. I think that the Catholic Church sucks. And I think that we should be able to go directly to God. And everyone's like, whoa, blasphemy, man. What are you talking about? You can't go to God. You need the priest, you know? And he's like, no, I think we can just go great. I think that this Jesus guy allows us to basically go right to God. All right. I don't think we need this priest thing. And he nails it, the Reformation, Reformation. He nails it to the doors of the church. It creates this revolution-like moment. Right? From there, many generations later, but not too far removed, you get the Pilgrims, and they're getting out of Europe because of what's been changing and things are moving. They're getting out of Europe, and they're just landing on Plymouth Rock, and they're just creating this whole new thing. Well, like you move forward to your next revolutionary moment, which approximately is every 250 years, and you get to this 1770s really moment where people are like, hey, I have an idea. I don't think we need this monarch king anymore. I think that we can just like govern ourselves and vote on it amongst ourselves. Does that sound good? And everyone's like, yeah, screw the king, out with the king, right? They fight a 5, 6, 7 year war. It depends on when you feel like it stopped. It really was probably more like a 15-year war if you really look at it, because once the British left, that's when the real war started, because everyone who didn't support the 5%, 3 to 5% of the revolutionists were like, so the king's gone and the Tories were here and we don't like Tories. And so that's when they really started the war. And so the 1780s are a mess, so much so that the original first president of the United States, you guys think is George Washington, which is just a military dictator that they brought in because the entire country was such a mess. The original guy's name was John Hanson. And they wrote John Hanson out because he was a constitutionally elected, the Congress elected him. And it was such a failure that they were like, no, bring in George Washington, the traitorous British general, and just he'll keep everything in line. And what does he do to keep things in line? Things you don't even want to talk about. Honest George Washington, this beautiful lie, can't tell a lie, he can't chop down a cherry tree, the whole thing, right? No, the real thing is George Washington is one of the most savage individuals that's ever lived, period. But he got things done, and he was a gentleman. And so we base our constitutional mindset off of this mythical figure that we've built up in our head. But I think at this point in time that it's possible that we've realized that our old ways of doing things, the idea of like your kids leave the house at 18 and then eventually they get their own mortgage. And so mom, dad have a mortgage, grandparents have a mortgage, and the kids have a mortgage. So there's 3 mortgages in one family. Might not be as smart as having like a family farm and no mortgage. Like that might have been something that the bankers were like, I got an idea. Let's make it easy for these guys to chop that up into like 5-acre home sites. And so no one can control massive amounts of this land. And so everyone will have a mortgage. Like, and whether there's a kind of evil plan underlying this, or this, how this shakes out over time, it doesn't really matter. Eventually we just get to this spot where we're looking around our world and we're like, everything here is kind of broken. And it starts with the money system, which really broke in the 70s, but they've been able to kick the can. My theory, Jack, moving forward here, is this idea of metamodernism, where we go, you know what, there's some things from the old that we need to realign with, and we're clearly in a new age. And I think it's revolutionary in nature, not in the fact that this is going to be like a 1776 moment, but in the fact that we actually have, to your point at the beginning of this, the people have their own currency. And that currency at this point in time is not taxed. It is taxed if you go into their currency, but it's not taxed if you stay in it and use it as your own currency. The problem is, where is their place and role inside of this new world? They don't have one. And so we have this moment where the parasites in society, the people who prey on the host, can no longer continue to suck the blood out of the host if the host says, no, we're shaking you off. Now, inevitably, the parasites will reemerge, probably from within, because we're fallible human beings. But for the moment, it's possible that we could have a Martin Luther-like moment or an end of monarchy-like moment where we're going like, hold on, time out. We started with the end of church and state because the state was like, dude, the church is too powerful. They're way too powerful. Now we have state and money, which was never a thing. Before, money was an independent thing. Money was independent of the church. It was independent of the state. It was just its own thing. There were 3 things. There were 3 entities. And there was a trinity in a way. And now the state has overtaken not only the money, but also the church. And the state runs essentially scientism, or whatever we want to call wokeism, which is their religion. They have control of the money, which is debt. and they have control of the state, which is lockdowns and everything else. And we happen to be on a 250-year timeline, about 25, about this time frame, 25 to 29, 30. We could debate the exact time period, but we're approaching, in my opinion, a revolutionary like moment. And the elites to this point in time have not shut things down as they should have, like centralist China, when they saw crypto on the scene and they said, "Nah, we're gonna cancel that." When they saw social media on the scene and they're like, I don't think so. And so we're in my opinion, Jack, I think we're reaching a point where all of these systems are going to break down, and the obstacle is the way.
Yeah, I mean, I see the breakdown happening in real time, right? And I did this video yesterday with Ninja and Chris Taylor from Financial Fitness and Mackie from Ironside Ranch, and we were talking about these fertilizer prices and what's happening with fertilizer. That's next year's food becoming more expensive. We've already got inflation, and now we've got farmers who are wondering, do I pay this ridiculous price for fertilizer right now, maybe not turn a profit, or do I gamble? Do I wait until the spring to place the order, run the risk that there isn't any on the market, and then what do? Do I cut back? Now my yield is going to drop.
Yep.
The food inflation risk right now, and I tell you, food prices, that's when it gets dangerous for the elites.
For sure.
When it gets too expensive to eat, your French Revolution, your Arab Spring, and there's the day again. They see that coming, and they are afraid of that.
Well, that's why they're backtracking COVID at the very moment. I just got done watching a Fauci video because, like, this isn't over until the old man sings, right? So, like, Fauci's trying to stick the landing, and he's like, well, it's important to understand with children in hospitals that it's not they're in hospitals because of COVID. They might be in hospitals with COVID. And we're like, yeah, we've been saying that since the first day of this entire scam. But nonetheless, they are backing out because they're realizing that, yeah, the entire thing, it's like the third law of thermodynamics, I believe. You're the engineer. The one where everything breaks down over time, whatever one that is.
Entropy, everything. Entropy can't be destroyed.
Yes, right. So that's where we're at. We're like everything is like, and they've accelerated this.
Well, so, one way that elites have figured out a way to maintain power through these economic wildfires that are cyclical. They, to your point, they happen every few hundred years, or lately every 20 years. But one way that they can maintain their power is by breaking us up into increasingly smaller groups, convincing us that the other guy's the problem, making us hate each other and making us fight each other.
For sure.
And they will create the boogeyman, right? The Germans had their boogeyman that they created. Now it's people who are refusing to undergo mandatory medical treatments that they want us all to get. Oh, yeah, they're the reason for their problem.
But that's why your food is too expensive. That those people were right, because even Fauci's confirmed it. Like, at this point in time, it's like, who was right? The purebloods. They were right.
So what they need, they need us to fight each other.
Of course.
In order to stay in power through what's coming, they can't allow our anger to be directed at them. And, I see things like Eastern Europe is ready to light off right now.
Yeah.
Boy, watch out. There's your energy markets. There's your food. Ukraine's one of the biggest food exporting countries in the world. I see this thing in Taiwan and this Evergrande collapse going on in China. Boy, you think the CCP isn't worried right now? Everybody in China has almost all of their wealth invested in the real estate market, and they're about to have a real estate collapse that's going to make 2007 look like child's play.
Yeah.
So I would not be surprised to see some of these countries and world leaders start wars, not to achieve any military objective, just to deflect public anger outward away from themselves at some third party, some other.
And that's what I'm getting at with Metamodern and my Instagram. Well, I was saying this like before they turned Facebook into Meta, because hey, Zuckerberg, what are you doing, man? Oh, well, that was Facebook. We're Meta now. It's like, no, bro.
Same guys. Yeah.
This is like for my Trump tard friends. It's like, guys, if he was the guy for the thing, he would have used the Patriot Act, which is completely unconstitutional, should never exist. But if he was the guy, he'd have brought Zuckerberg in. He'd have sent a SEAL team and brought Zuckerberg in. That's what he would have done. But nonetheless, it's like they do spin the narrative. However, the average dude is pretty aware of it at this point in time. And so that's where it's like we are on that 250-year revolutionary like moment, because there is an exit ramp here. And the exit ramp is, whether you like it or not, it's like crypto is an option for sure. Because when you mention hyperinflation, I see a perfect landing. Okay, so Weimar Germany, hyperinflation. Oh, it's terrible. Wheelbarrows of money, the whole thing, right? And what happens after the hyperinflation in Germany? The guy for the thing shows up. Hey guys, he writes a book while he's in jail. And the book is called Mein Kampf. And the book is, there is this global elite banking class. They're primarily Jewish. So just so that we don't, leave any stones unturned, let's just say the Jews. And everyone's like, that kind of makes sense. But what he's really pushing is, dude, it's the money, man. And what does he do to fix the country? And he fixes the country so much so where they're pushing around wheelbarrows of money. And 10 years later, they're the first people to not only have jet airplanes, twin engine jets. We're up there with P-51s, and he's up there with twin engine jets. And they're whipping by and they're like, holy crap, what was that? And
the other thing he did is he created that anger. He created that subset of the population to be the target for all of that public outrage.
Absolutely.
And
absolutely.
Boy,
but in a positive, he re-implemented state banking. And in a way, he fixed the economy in like 10 years. But he needed a boogeyman to pull everyone towards a common goal. Because at the end of the day, money is all fake and made up, unless it's like silver or gold. It's all fake. Okay? It's just what you think. I traded an hour of my life and I want to buy a good that is what I've deemed valuable enough. Well, here's the thing. I used to trade hours of my life when I was 14 for $6.25. Nowadays, I don't trade them for like less than 200, 150. If I'm helping someone, sometimes it's free. Back then, I didn't have the time to help people. Like, I got a buddy that's moving here. He might start a little farm homestead. I'm going to help him. You know what I mean? So I value my time differently, and I don't necessarily value it in US dollars at this point.
And yet, we gotten this far and we haven't mentioned gold and silver yet. I'm pretty surprised, but you just touched on it. That's the other thing that's going on that's leaning me towards this hyperinflation scenario is the de-dollarization I see going on globally. I see central banks buying up gold at a pace we haven't seen in 30 years. I see other countries making trade deals among themselves, cutting the dollar out of the equation. Meanwhile, the Federal Reserve is engaged in quantitative easing, still buying up the debt, trying to keep this IOU system afloat just a little bit longer. So I think the gold and silver is also a very big element to that. Now, Bitcoin has kind of somewhat blurred that line and occupies a little bit of that space, but Bitcoin is so highly speculative. I think there's still room for the gold and silver. I see them coexisting. And when it comes down to it, they'll let the price of gold and silver rise once they're convinced they've got enough of it. They being the elites, the ruling classes, the central banks around the world, right? We've got Basel III is going to be implemented, but London was carved out of it. So London is the biggest gold vault in the world. We don't really know what that's going to look like. But we know right now they want the price of gold and silver lower, and they are buying it up hand over fist.
And this is amazing for us, right? Yep. Because everybody who buys some silver, like I see this a lot, and this is interesting in the Reddit forum groups. I like to get in there and be a fly on the wall, sometimes read comments, and I'll read like an hour and a half of comments. All right, I will read a book of comments. And it's like, when's silver gonna pump, man? I'm so bored of silver not pumping and stuff. And it's like, patience, young grasshoppers. Yep. Like, you have to go back to what money is. It is a unit of weight and balance, and the Lord detests unequal weights and balances. And a unit of silver, a tenth of an ounce of silver, is a day's labor in every empire except our current one, which means for $30, you can buy 10 days of skilled labors. Just wait on it. Because if the entire thing it collapses, that's what the value is going to be, except there's less of it. Because here's the problem. We put a lot of it in landfills in the last 50 years, which means that those are the new mines. And this opens my case for metamodernism. The opportunity through my lifetime, when I'm an old guy, is automated machinery mining the old landfills and turning them back into parks and recreational areas and getting the toxic waste and all that gone, why we mine for the actual elements that we need, that we put in this depository. At this moment, it's just like, oh, just take your crap and your old phone and toss it in there and toss it in there and let it leach into the water. And then people are drinking the water and they're dying of cancer. I mean, I literally have a friend from high school, lost his dad, lost his sister, lost his horse, all to the same exact cancer. Turns out they were on a well. Turns out their house was built on an old dump.
Oh, jeez.
You know?
Yeah.
And it's like, wow, that shouldn't happen. We shouldn't do that. But we do that. And when I hear you guys talk about the fertilizer thing, the interesting thing, and I'll link in the show notes to this, to Ironside, I call it Ironsides, whatever.
Ironside Ranch, yep.
Ironside Ranch. Chris is like, hey, so what about this fertilizer shortage? And Ironside Ranch is like, yeah, we don't use it, man. We farm like the right way, so whatever. And I was
out
like,
the back of the cow. That's his fertilizer.
Like, yep, that's how we're supposed to. We're supposed to farm like the old bison. They roam the plain. There's 15 different varieties of grass out there. They roam it. They tear it up. They poop all over it. They come back a year later. You graze your animals over it. Like, there's a different method. Nowadays, we till the soil. We do a bunch of different things, and it's just not the way to go. But we get a fertilizer shortage. Yeah, it's going to suck for a little bit. But people are going to go, you know what? Ironside Ranch is making money over here. Why don't we do it like them? And so what happens is guys like me are like, dude, I'd like to be a part of this. I'm like, I'm OnSiteTrav. I want to go run machines and do hippie stuff. That's what I do, So it's like, heck yeah, ranching sounds awesome. But just taking 400 acres and doing monoculture of corn and spraying pesticide all day behind a John Deere tractor that I can't even legally work on myself because John Deere has written the contract in a way where only a John Deere dealer can touch that automated tractor. Screw you guys. That's not what I want to do. I want to run a machine on biodiesel, and I want to grow my own biodiesel in a way, if it's possible, or use a waste product. And I want to do monoculture. I don't want any of you guys to be part of my transaction whatsoever. And so I think when we get on the other side of this period of history, that we will find ourselves in this Metamodern like world where it'll be different, but it'll be a lot more robust and a lot more decentralized. And to your point on hyperinflation, we'll begin to wrap it. I see this as a soft landing because, yeah, the hyperinflation is going to suck and it's going to wipe out the average middle class guy if he doesn't see it coming. But there is an off ramp. There is a release valve. The cryptos and the silver and the gold, like, it's all there. Like, all those options are there. But it doesn't even matter if he partakes in that or not, because if we get to a new world where the money printer and the state and the church are separate entities, we're in a better place. And so I don't care if he's got to go poor for a few years and things get wild and gnarly, and the best of human like kind can come out and go, hey, how do we help our neighbors? Like, how do we do this? I don't care, because it seems inevitable to me that that's what we're going to do. We're going to have to wipe out this debt somehow. Back in the Old Testament, they used to have a debt jubilee. Now we don't do debt jubilees. So we're going to have a debt jubilee, but it's going to be like biblical proportions. It's going to be huge. And the elites are going to try to take us to war. But that's why I'm here on the microphone, on the screen this evening with Jack, saying like, hey, if we're going to war, we don't really need to go to war, right? We know who's responsible, and we don't need to do anything to them. All we have to do is just say, we just have to leave their party and go have our own party, right? We just
don't be another piece of meat fed into the grinder so they can stay in power.
Yep. Yeah, we don't need them. We can leave. Right? We have blockchain, we have solar, we have we have information, like we have video streaming. We don't need them, right? We can leave, right? And they've actually just done us a favor. They've purged their entire military of all the guys that would actually do anything, and they're only left with the yesers and the guys that honestly are not going to be able to take guys that are former military. Like, they're just not, right? And so we're at this spot where I see this as a soft landing, where you have this hyperinflation, but you have a Satoshi worth about $1. Okay.
I'll take that.
Whatever. So who's the new elite? We are. We're the new elite. Like, if you want currency, you have to come to me to get it. And so I'll be investing in buying landfills and buying all the bobcats I can find and running them on biodiesel and mining all of the silver I can find and sending them off to Elon Musk to get more robots. That's what we're going to do. Right. And that's what ultimately is going to happen. And then the guys are gonna be like, do we need fertilizer? Does it really make sense? Why don't we just do things the natural way? Why don't we just have bison? Like, we have a testosterone problem in this country. I'm ranting a little bit. But it's like, dude, if we go back to eating like grass-fed bison versus like your McDonald's patty, like hamburger chicken nuggets thing, like you're probably going to have a fix in your testosterone. Like, like I just don't see how it's not gonna. I mean, the Ironside guy, I haven't met him, but he's jacked. I mean, you can just tell, like the guy's just built. He's like Chris.
Yeah, Chris will intimidate you through a computer screen. So
yeah, I mean, look, Chris grows his own food too, man. He cans it and grows his eggs and all that. So anyway, I think that when we get on the backside of this, it's a lot more positive. But the 20s are going to be a rough period of time for a lot of people. But it's going to be an opportunity because I think, and I could be wrong in this, but I think this is going to be the biggest wealth transfer in history. And I think that the wealth is going to be transferred away from the people that were deceiving with it and to the people that saw the opportunity. And I just think that that's a better thing. I would rather the ninja, be in the 1% than Dr. Fauci be in the 1%. I'm just better with that. And so I think it's going to suck, but I think that that's what's going to happen.
Yeah. The last thing I would leave you with is it has already started. They are already making us hate each other, and it's already working. All right. Think about these circuses going on in the press. All right. And I'm not going to name any specific trials or anything, but trials, right? Trials are the ultimate way to break people up into groups and to make them hate each other.
Of course.
And look at all these trials and the cameras and studying the facial expressions of this guy and that jury and this. But the one trial that there wasn't any cameras in that courtroom.
Nope, for sure.
Nope, not the one that they are at risk. Not the one that might make us angry at No cameras in that courtroom. It's already being done. They're already breaking us up into groups and trying to make us hate each other. Don't let them do it.
But just seeing what you, the Ninja, Chris, I mean, Ironsides, I mean, what other people are doing at this point in time, I don't know. I just don't think these guys have a prayer. I don't think they have a prayer.
They'll have to shut us up eventually, though. They'll try.
I mean, they'll probably flip the net off. But look, I mean, I'm part of a thing at this point. Like, literally, where our entire internet is built on 11 military servers running HTTPS. Everybody familiar with that?
Yep.
I'm on something that's completely different. It's a new internet, and it can't be censored. And it's small, and it's kind of clunky, and kind of looks like AOL chat a little bit. But like, you can't censor it, and you can't have a Facebook occur because there's just the platform's just not built for that. And so
now I understand the Linux comment from earlier. Yeah.
Yes. And so, but it's not just, it's kind of like Linux, but it's a little bit it's built off of that in a way. And it's just like, if I go on Instagram, I want those photos to be my photos. I want them to be my own NFTs. So if somebody likes the picture of my Ferrari or 7.3 or 69 Camaro or whatever it is, like, where it becomes a tradable asset. But nonetheless, absent of that complexity, I want my Facebook newsfeed or my Facebook page to be my property. And it's not. It's Mark Zuckerberg's property, and I'm the product.
You are the product. Yeah.
Right. But this internet doesn't work like that. Like, this new internet doesn't work like that. So it's like they're backpedaling on everything at this point in time. And they also have no one in the wings. They haven't mentored anyone. I mean, all they've done is just pick fights with anyone that could have possibly been like an AOC on the left. Oh, you might not like AOC. She's kind of cute. We can admit that. But it's like, they're not mentoring this young girl. And so she's becoming more radical. And so you have this, they're not handing the baton. And so what's going to happen is there's going to be a fumble. And when there's a fumble, like, me and my friends are going to fill the power vacuum of the new elite, and it's going to be in a decentralized manner. Like, we have the Bitcoin, like, we have the silver, we have the gold, like we have like the edible plants, like what do we need them for? And so I think that it's positive on the backside of this, but in the from here to there, and I appreciate you unpacking your theory there, because really what happens is we probably get to like the 2030s, and like the two nations, as like I'm talking like China and America, the two nations are probably like, well, we need a new thing here, And my concern, like a lot of people, is I'm not trying to get into a World War III. No way. Like, look, I love America, but I've seen a lot of these American dudes at Walmart wearing these masks, and I'm not trying to go to knock out Russians with these guys. I'm not, no. Or Chinese. Like, if I had to pick a team, I'd rather hang with the Russians. Like, like they're like, so I don't think it's in the best interest of the common Russian or the common Chinese. Certainly the common man, the common Chinese man. If anything, he's the person that we can uplift. And he's the person that we need. And so if there's a way to remove these elites, whether, hopefully it's peacefully, but it doesn't really matter. It can be financially. If there's a way to just ignore them and just be like, yeah, we're going to our own party. We're throwing our own house party. There's better beer over here. Come over here. Mm-hmm. And everyone can be like, oh, this is awesome. And we don't need these old school governments. Maybe it's an option. It might not work like that, but I think all of the ingredients are sitting there. And when I see you guys, the Gen Xers out there just pushing all this content all day, and I'm like, yeah, that too many people know now about what they've got going on, and they don't know what to do about it. Because I think we think that there's a big plan, this big evil plan, that something's going on here, and maybe there is, and maybe Gates has a plan, but Gates doesn't have any knights. He doesn't have any SEALs. Like, he doesn't have anyone that he can pay anything to that has a more, and this is what we see in religious entities. They believe in something that they're willing to die for. There's no one's willing to die for wokeism. No one's willing to die for masking or for medical pharma, or no one's willing to die for abortion or for any of these bullshit godless issues that are pointless and empty. And all that we're going to see as we travel through the 2040s of these people and their ideas and their communist-like philosophies is a bunch of women in their 40s who decided that feminism was the way. And now they're like, oh, wait, no, it wasn't. And we're going to probably see witch trials, like we're going to get to that type of spot where the society is going to be so crazy where people are going to be like, yeah, we're done with this. And hopefully we avoid that epic nationalistic war. I
hope so too, because like I mentioned at the beginning here, our capacity for violence is vastly improved over the last century, and the last century was not pretty.
No,
not pretty.
No,
not many people left alive who lived through a lot of that. And most of it was in black and white, and most of it was before camera phones.
Mm-hmm.
But the information is out there, and it's scary, and there's a lot more people. There's a lot more of us now too. What it was, population was just over 1 billion, I think, during World War II, or 2 or 3 billion, maybe.
Yeah, now we're like 9,
7.5, 8.
Yeah. I mean,
I really hope it doesn't come to that. I'd like to think we're better than that.
Yeah,
I'd like to.
Well, it could also be economic. It could be financial. It could be cyber. War is many things. It doesn't always have to be what you traditionally think it is. When the French learned this in World War I, when they showed up with horses and cannonballs, and the Americans are like, yeah, so this is a machine gun. Hold my beer. It was real quick. First couple battles with the French. Like, oh, wow, things have changed. But now, warfare is different. And actually, I would argue that we're already in one, and that it's propaganda. And that's really, so you and I are fighting this war as far as intellectuals talking about these ideas. And then we've got the average Joes out there that are like, you know what, they're right. And as we pivot away, I mean, Jack, imagine if people just pivoted away from using the fake US dollar.
Yeah.
I mean, where's their power? Where's their taxing authority? How are they going to pay their military?
Well, other countries are already doing it. And, a certain subset of the population is already doing it. I mean, Bitcoin's doesn't really transact so well.
Nope.
I don't want to upset the Bitcoin maxis.
No, big Bitcoin maxis, it could be a base layer of something, maybe.
Right.
But your history and the blockchain public history, look, I'm thankful for what Bitcoin got us to. And if it's just a tugboat that gets us to mile 4 out of a 24-mile race, and we've got to switch into a different, faster boat, I'm fine with it. Yep. And that's what the maxis are like, no, we're rolling this whole trip. No, dude. Like, Bitcoin wasn't built to cross the Atlantic. It was just built to get us to the first island chain. And that's fine. And maybe as a nostalgia item, it does end up being some sort of base layer, or it does morph into something. But
it won't be a dog. It won't be a dog coin though.
I would argue a total opposite, different conversation.
You think it'll be a dog coin?
Absolutely. Yeah, Milton Friedman would agree. He's in his grave right now going, Trav's right. It has the perfect inflation rate. You need inflation for currency. And that's why silver and gold work, because there's an inflation rate to silver and gold. And you have to have inflation, because if you don't have inflation, you have deflation, you have depression. And I love the idea of a decentralized world and a deflationary world, but I don't think people are going to stomach a 30-year depression to get it.
Trav, before 1971, we had deflation for pretty much all of history.
Always. Yep.
And I don't think things were that bad, right? I mean, when we went from hunter-gatherers to farmers, that was deflationary. And Joe Brown does this really well over at Heresy Financial. It's a great channel.
Yeah.
We used to have to spend every waking moment just to search out enough food to eat for that day. And then we discovered farming. And now the price of food was not the entire day's work. Now the entire day's work could produce enough food for 2 people. That's deflationary.
Yep.
Right. But that wasn't an economic collapse. That was an economic boom. Now the other guy doesn't have to grow his food. Now the other guy can build tools for the farmer to grow even more food. And now that's deflationary, because now the farmer's growing enough for 5 guys.
I totally agree. The thing is, silver and gold typically grows at like 1.5% to 3% a year as far as the supply. And it's cyclical, right? It depends on diesel fuel. It depends on findings. It depends on politics. It's cyclical. But if you go back in history and you find big gold finds where the money supply inflates, causes problems. If you don't find gold finds, the price of gold goes up, which is okay. Doesn't really matter what the price is, but it goes up in terms of labor and other input costs. And you have little depressionary times. And so what I'm saying is, I love the idea of the Bitcoin promise of we're going to go to a completely deflationary world. But here's the problem. The first Bitcoin I ever encountered was sold for a $3 beer. My buddy's still alive though. Didn't offer
as a currency. Yeah. I mean, it's,
but hey, people selling Bitcoin at 50,000 right now, they're going to regret it.
Yeah.
You know that, right? And then, and so what happens is, do I buy a dump truck for 50,000 as a site guy, as a guy that builds farms for people and helps build people homesteads? And that's, I build a state like that. That's what I do, land clearing. Do I buy a dump truck, or do I buy the Bitcoin? Well, if I buy the Bitcoin and go to the beach, provided I have enough of my own, to buy my beer, and it ends up being the better investment, well, there's no guys in dump trucks building farms. Eventually I run out of wheat for my beer.
The one thing that does that, it eliminates this reckless and this horrible investment, right? Nobody's going to pay $150 valuation or $150 billion valuation for Rivian stock that hasn't even made a car yet.
Yeah.
If your money might be worth a little bit more tomorrow.
It's true.
But if your money's going down the toilet, well, sure, I guess let's buy Rivian. It's going to be worthless tomorrow anyway.
To conclude, my Bitcoin maximalist, to appease Max Kaiser, the great Max Kaiser, who knows that Monero is real Bitcoin, but it doesn't matter. But my thing is, maybe we get to a point where you hodl your Bitcoin because it's just going to keep appreciating in value. And then we destroy fiat currencies where there's this, do I want to have these fiat dollars or do I want to have the Satoshis? And in a way, if the fiat currency inflates its way out of existence and there are just Satoshis, well, we can calculate how many Satoshis there are relative to how many ounces, how many barrels, how many pounds of whatever. We can ratio everything. And so the spreadsheet now works. And so if the spreadsheet now works, now we can go to a deflationary currency where I can buy that dump truck with my Satoshis. But at this moment in time, the answer so far for the last 12 years has been, do not buy that dump truck, Trav. Continue to buy Satoshis. And,
you mentioned Max Kaiser. I think Max standing up at that Bitcoin conference screaming F Elon, and then ripping up the $100 bill we're not selling. That was the Carlos from New York moment this time around.
We're gonna have to unpack that on a future stream.
Yeah, that was the top, the Kaiser top.
Oh man, that's good. We'll definitely have to unpack it, but I do see the helicopter landing where it could be a soft landing where it's like, hey, the dollar is hyperinflating, but so is Bitcoin. But hey, when Bitcoin's done inflating, there's only so many of them. And so essentially you have to hold the one to destroy the other, and then you move on. And then people will bring, well, what if the lights flicker? I agree. You got to have both. You got to have, there's nothing is all or one. The great thing is that at this moment in time, at a 250-year period on a revolutionary cycle, if you believe in cycles, we have exit ramps and we have options. And I like the fact that we have options. We got something better than a printing press, and we got something better than a rifle. And those are the two things in the last revolutions that made the difference. Was a bunch of farmers had it because old boys had muskets, and these kids had things that spun like a football, and it seemed to work. And then the guys before that had a printing press, and they were like, hey, what if we can go directly to God and not pay the tax to the priest? So
cut out the middleman every time.
That's there's no new business model. It's just repackaging the old business model. All right, Jack, thank you for your time.
Thanks, Trav. It's been a pleasure.
Absolutely.